We are going to start our module on exploration of sound and our path through composition techniques with the composers John Cage and Pauline Oliveros. Both of these are American experimentalists of the 20th century. And we'll start with John Cage because he's probably more famous or infamous, depending on your outlook on his life and music and what he brings to the table. And probably the most famous piece that he is known for is the one titled 4 minutes and 33 seconds, right? And it gets a lot of interesting reactions, even to this day, and you can kind of consider that to be one of the successes, perhaps, of something like that. But if you're not aware, 4 minutes and 33 seconds is a multi-movement work where the performer is asked to do nothing. They are asked to sit on stage and do nothing. And the original performance of 4 minutes and 33 seconds was upstate New York at an artist retreat in the woods. And the performance space of that performance is a performance hall with lots of big windows amongst all these trees in a forest. And it's an open air facility. And so the idea and the premiere of this piece involved not sitting in an sound tight space in a concert hall where the acoustics are perfect and you can hear every little thing. It was meant to be performed in a space where you hear the world around you. So you're sitting in this sort of open air, vaulted ceiling, beautiful space in the woods at this artist retreat, and the performer comes out and sits at the piano. And instead of filling the space with the music of a man-made device with man-made music, Cage is emphasizing the natural space, the world around us, and the sounds that occur, that we interact with on a daily basis, but sometimes choose to ignore or need to ignore. And the framework for this is kind of cool. The problem is that hereafter, 4 minutes and 33 seconds has been considered to be this sort of joke of a piece because when it's performed in a concert hall or in a concert setting, yes, it does drive home this message of, sort of bucking the system and having a performance that isn't the performance and sort of thumbing the nose at performance culture and such and such and such. But really, it was intended for us to hear things that aren't in the concert hall, right? So I'd like to start with this example of what we're talking about when we explore sound. What Cage is talking about when he's talking about exploring silence. You can say a lot by not saying anything at all, by removing the self, the human, man-made aspect of music making from the equation, and just stop and listen. And so that's one step, one side of this new new module here is exploring the concept of not doing anything when we're musicians, to just listen and open our minds to the sounds that we hear when we listen. And so his discussion here, down here, this is a little interview with him he died in 1992, so this is going to be an old video. And he explains his viewpoints or philosophy on the relationship of sound and silence and our relationship to that as people and as musicians. And what does that mean as a composer? What does that mean as a musician? How do we interact in that relationship? And just sort of consider those things. This article also helps to frame his philosophy on how we view sound and silence from a traditional perspective and from a non-traditional perspective. So a lot of what we do in this first activity is going to be literally listening to things that aren't music, right? Challenging ourselves to listen into our world a little bit and to notice the things that we hear. Pauline Oliveros is she died in 2016, and is a renowned composer and performer, and also a leading philosopher in the idea of deep listening. So not necessarily listening to silence, not necessarily exposing silence as a musical element, but rather deep listening, or maybe listening to things on a sort of meditative or contemplative level, stopping the activity of music and listening into a drone or listening into a series of sounds, and getting to know sort of how those sounds are affecting us. And as an accordionist, some of the coolest musicians are accordionists for some reason. As an accordionist, some of her performances involve sort of these longer tones, and basically the piling up of sounds. Some of her compositions are more experimental, yet very sort of meaningful as a social aspect. So this is the tuning meditation is a really interesting example of her work, where you have a room full of people in a vaulted space. This takes place in a church, a stone environment where there's a lot of reverberation, and you're supposed to just kind of choose a note. The instructions are given at the beginning of the video, and then listen to those around you and create a note that's not the same as those around you, and it creates this sort of group singing experience. And so I recommend, or this part of our weekly assignment is to listen and watch this episode, this video, and sort of experience her music, and also to get to know her philosophies on music as well, understanding what deep listening is all about through this KQED video, and get to know kind of her personality and her philosophy on music. Which I think is very meaningful and a good place to start for us, since we are sort of broadening our concept of music and thinking about how we can port this over to ourselves as educators and as musicians as well. So our first discussion is just sort of getting started and thinking about these in light of what we've talked about, or what these folks are talking about. What is your personal definition of music, and how does that relate to the concept of sound and silence? What is a composer to us? Has that changed? Sometimes our concept of a composer is, like the Mozart Haydn model, right? Or maybe a composer is just any old person who puts sounds together. What does that mean to you, right? Do you consider yourself a composer? Do you consider, your colleagues, your students, composers? And that's something that we're wrapping our minds around. Discuss your philosophy of the process of composing and listening. Notice that there's no large C on the composer or the music or the silence. Everything has a lower case. So we're just kind of breaking this down into approachable things. Does your philosophy align with Cage or Oliveros, or both or neither in any way? So we're just kind of exploring these ideas. Finally, our assignment for this week, for this first half of the first module, is something that we do. I know I do this in my classroom classes, and where I ask people to do a silent day. And this is a challenge, and this isn't something where we're actually composing music, but we're reckoning with the sounds around us. So, but for us, I know we're all busy, and we have jobs and families and all kinds of stuff happening. So I'm paring this down to just a 3 to 5 hour period, not a whole day, but just 3 to 5 hours, to avoid traditional music, avoid media if you can, and just to turn off the headphones. I know a lot of our students have their earbuds in all the time, and I know my son does, just constantly listening to either YouTube videos or music or Spotify or what have you. If every space we go into has piped music, has media going, and it often shapes our viewpoints, and it's kind of an assault on our senses in some way. It could be seen as that. So spend a good half a day avoiding that type of input, right? And just to listen to the sounds around us. And sometimes this is actually quite moving to us, that we can sort of concentrate on the sounds in our environment. So at the end of this period, write a 1 to 2 page reflection paper that addresses the following. So we're shooting for two sides of a sheet of whatever. In your paper, address the following. How did this experience change your perception? You can also describe your experience, like what the context is. Like, I chose a Saturday because I work, Monday through Friday, and I'm surrounded by music all the time. And I also asked my family to join in with me, or I asked my partner to join in with me, or what have you. How did that experience change your perception of sound in the world around us? You can also describe positive and negative ways. Did you hate it? Was it unnerving? Did it make you anxious? Or did you really enjoy it? Did it sort of lower your sense of anxiety and tension? Observe the sounds around you. Listen to what you are now hearing if you ignore these sorts of things. Describe your sonic landscape. Describe the place in which you chose to participate in this exercise. How hard was this for you? How hard is it to escape these sounds and this sort of input? And what did you observe about how hard that was, right? What do you take away from that? Of course, since we're listening to these things, what are some sounds that you particularly liked? What are some sounds that you particularly didn't like? Were there some things that you found, pretty satisfying to listen to? Or are there some sounds that you found annoying? Just a reflection of this exercise is a good place to start. And in the next half, we'll talk about how to organize these sorts of sounds into an experience that we can share with others. So enjoy. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.